pass the control over to Sue. Sue, I'm going to let you drive the bus here and just lead us through our April challenge projects that people have presented.
I'm going to quick make Sue a co. Maybe I did.
Okay, this is Ann Molina.
Okay, this is a walnut bowl. It's about 8 inches by 2. And when I started out, it had this nice rim that came up and went out. My original idea was to cut a groove in there, which I did. And then I took a piece of brass small length chain and put it in the groove. And then I was going to put epoxy in there. Well, to hold the chain in place, I used CA. Then when I added the epoxy, the CA either reacted with the chain or with the epoxy because it became cloudy where I used it. So I tried cutting it out, and anyway, nothing worked. So I cut it off, and I ended up doing a copper wire around the side. And then I think the next picture, Sue, shows a close-up of where I burned a line above it and below it, and then I put the copper wire in the middle. And that's it. Oh, well, that's my challenge, or the show and tell. I was in Texas last week, and I made this platter for my son. It's about 14 inches wide by 1.5 inches. And he was asking for something that he could put barbecue on. But what I liked about this is that there was the black spot on the left was a big knot hole, and the knot stayed in there until the very end, and it came out. But when it came out, you could look in and just, it was real interesting looking in there. So I filled it with clear epoxy. And you can't tell there, but you could hold it just right and look in and see the inside of there, which I thought was kind of cool. And I think that's the next picture, Sue, but it's, okay, maybe not. There. You can't see how neat it really looked in person. Okay, that's all.
Anthony Harris.
This is a goblet I made out of aluminum. It just seemed like if we were going to make things out of metal, it was the first thing to do. It's kind of mealy. It doesn't cut as cleanly as you might think. The inside I mostly scraped, and I guess there's different grades of aluminum, and this one, at least on the outside, inside, comes off the scraper in a mealy. The outside cuts, I cut it with a gouge, cut fairly well. I didn't sand it. Just, that's all.
Does it create a lot of heat from friction?
No. Yeah, you can't wear sandals though. This is a Saturn Box. It's one of those spherical boxes I made, and this is 4-inch diameter brass, and I used a power hacksaw to cut slices off of the brass rod, essentially 4-inch diameter rod, and then held it in a chuck, chased a thread in it. This one is smooth on the other side, and I just cut the rings on this side just as kind of just to see how it worked. The the globe is made out of coco-bolo, and so this is when it's taken apart. One of the things I discovered was that I didn't leave, what's the way to say it? I didn't leave, you'd have to subtract some from the height of the box to put the ring in so that the box is still round. And so this extends out a little too far, top and bottom. This is a throw top. And from early on, I used to pound a nail or a brad into the end of it, and while it's still on the lathe, and then turn the brad down so that it's concentric and smooth.
And this is Daniel Dubois. He had listed it for show and tell, but it was metal and wood, so I put it in challenge.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should include just like a kit like this for the challenge, but I'll take it. So I recently hit 500 subscribers on my YouTube channel. So this is a piece that I turned out of elm burl and epoxy resin as a giveaway for a random person who commented on my video. And so that's what I made.
Cool.
And this is Dave Stalling.
Okay, this is a sphere, hemisphere, and we're taking the center out of it. And that's just an old piece of 4x4 that turned out to be useful. So there's nothing exciting there. Go to the next one. And there's 6 of them, and they weigh about 70 grams a piece, and they are tongue oil. And I found that you could essentially wet the tongue, put the tongue oil on and put it in the microwave on a little bit of cardboard and heat it for not more than a minute. And the tongue oil gets very, very thin and soaks very nicely into the wood. And also you'll see a few bubbles come out from the moisture leaving the wood. Anyway, quick way to get tongue oil soaked wood. And where are we going with this? Well, I thought we'd put some metal together. And here's the center hub, and it shows the opposed magnets. There's a piece of aluminum threaded, and the metal stand at the bottom has been drilled and tapped for 1/4 inch, 13 threads. And then the magnet that you see is opposing a magnet that you don't see in the bottom of the hub. And so if you go to the next one, then, oh, this is something I found that looks like it could be quite useful for things that you're going to put outdoors. It's weather defense. It's a silicone polymer, and they use it for fabrics as well, but it soaks very nicely into wood. And so that's after I did the tongue oil, I gave those a coating with that weather defense. They also make a version of this for metal. I think next should get us. And that's what we're about. And if you fire up the video, you see what we've made. And that is an anemometer with 6 hemispherical, and it turns at the slightest whisper. And it's on a stand from Aldi's that was like $10, I think. So that's just going around, and it shows a little bitty cone at the top that is designed to keep water out of the inside of that, because next winter it'll freeze up if you don't put a water shield on top of it. And those arms are on a 30-degree angles. It takes 6 of them, and they're offset up and down the equivalent of 1 sphere. So there's actually 2 anemometer arms operating more or less independently. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's cool.
This is Chris Coyne.
So I hit open shop last Thursday, and Anthony goes, well, what are you doing for the challenge? And I had no idea. I knew what it was. I just hadn't come up with a good solid idea for it. Saturday came around, and my wife and I started cleaning out cupboards and getting rid of old cups. So I found an old insulated coffee mug that had a rubber outer shell that I peeled off and decided that was my metal, and I was going to make the wood outer shell for it. So I segmented some of the flute wood along with a little bit of white oak that I had, and created, if you go to the next one, so that's the 2 pieces pulled apart, but it slides right in there. I couldn't have been happier with the fit. It fit right down into the cup, goes all the way up to the seam. And I think I got one more picture at the bottom of it. Actually, that hole is how close I came to going through the bottom. When I had the last little nib, I reverse chucked it and cut the bottom off. And when I was chiseling off the nib, it was flexing, and I knew it was really thin, and ultimately it popped out. And so I just sanded it round, and it works real good because you see the nib on the bottom of that metal piece through that hole in the bottom, and it also allows the air to kind of push through, so it releases easy and goes in easy as well. So that was my project. I just had to come up with an idea.
This is Mike Thomas.
Okay. This is a piece of flute wood. Now, okay, I needed to make this anyway. I've been playing around with gun drill, and I needed this piece that goes into the tailstock that will hold the gun drill so it will be straight going into something. And then there's a hose bar. Click through the couple other pictures, and there, I think there's a side view of, there's a hose barb that you hook up to your air compressor, and it blows through that into the through the gun drill, and it comes out the tip to keep it cool, and it blows all the chips back out through the flute. So anyway, there's only one company I could find that makes these things, and they're $150, and they're out of stock, and they have no idea when they're going to get more of them made. But I decided to go ahead, and I thought, you know, this flute wood is really hard stuff anyway, so I just turned it out of that. Now the groove in the middle there of the is where I wanted to put my spindle steady on there, but I yet wanted the flat so I could hold on to it, you know, as I'm like you do when you're drilling, you know, holding on to the Jacob's chuck in your tailstock. So anyway, that's what that is, and it came out just perfectly. And there are two set screws that hold the base of the gun drill in there. You can click through those, Sue. I think there's two or three. Yeah, there's the end where the handle goes in. That's what I actually kind of drew up trying to design this thing, and it worked out perfectly. I mean, it works great. So anyway, and there's more I have in the show and tell, so that's for later.
Yeah. This is Phil Sykes.
Hi, everybody. This is just a tool handle that I made recently. I like to make my own tool handles for my tools. So this just has a 1/2-inch spindle gouge in it there. But what I've never done before is the little, the set screw there has kind of a handle on it. And I've seen other like manufacturers make like metal, little like quick release type things where you can just turn it and release it. So go to the next picture, Sue. The wall on top with it's got a 1/4-20 bolt through the middle of it. Just something super simple that I drilled out, I glued it in, and then I turned the little knob there. So now instead of pulling out an Allen key to undo my set screw, I can just turn the knob there and release my tool so I can take it over to the sharpener there. And then the last photo is just the top there. It still has the Allen key hole on top if I really want to crank it down or need to loosen it. But just a quick way to release my tool so I can sharpen it quickly and then get it back in and get back to the lathe.
Cool.
And this is Rick Tucker. He's not here tonight. The wood is from a storm-damaged tree that his neighbor had taken out, and it's spalted shingle oak. And then the metal is an aluminum wire that the power company had cut out and thrown away, mounted with epoxy. And this is my piece. It's a small cherry box. Then the insert on the top is copper with silver foil and green enamel.
Nice.
We'll do our stop share here.
All right, we had quite a few, and then Kevin, are you going to announce a challenge winner now?
I forgot to send this one in.
Oh, go ahead, Rick.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so basically, I've just got a big metal bolt, And so I turned the nut to fit the bolt.
Where did you get the bolt?
This bolt came out of a factory down in Oklahoma City where they manufactured tires. And from this bolt, I determined that it was a 4.5 inch TPI, threads per inch. And so I always wanted to try and make a wooden nut to fit this bolt. And I called Robert Sorby to see if they would customize a thread chaser, and they wouldn't do it. And I was able to get the same size thread chaser from a guy up in Washington State. And so, yeah, that's, and from that's where I've then made large wooden nuts and bolts from this, using this as a model. This thing must weigh about 5 pounds, easy.
Drop it.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing, Rick. Yep. All right. So, Kevin, are we going to have...
I have run the random numbers. There was 10 people that did the challenge, and the number came up 7, so that means Phil Sykes is the lucky winner. Thank you, Phil.
Yay.
Phil, thank you. Good job. All right. I think that takes care of the challenge. And so now we'll just roll into our show and tell for the night. So again, Sue, I'm going to let you take over the screen and run through the images that we got shared.
Okay, this is Anthony Harris.
These are some of those fake hollow forms. You put the piece on, turn it relatively round, cut it in half, make 2 bowls, use a box joint to put it back together, and then turn the outside. I've shown the cherry and the ash one before. I finished the oak one finished drying a little while ago, and I put a finish on it. They all 3 have the same finishes on. I don't know how big they are. Yeah, so that's just the other side of it.
Is it that 3-part finish that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So are those threaded together, or you said a box joint?
Yeah, it's a box joint. They're glued. I
Cool.
turn them when they're green and glue them when they're green, and leave them on the, actually turn them while the glue is drying. Just turn them between centers. And by the time you're done finishing up that joint, you can, they're dry enough to finish turning without the tailstock.
Cool.
This is, I don't know how big this is. This is about 10 or 11 inches across. It's a piece of wood that was in the trash can at the club, and it was rotten pretty much all the way through. I left it a little thick. I used a traditional grind gouge on the inside and a spindle gouge on the outside, so I didn't have to sand it very much. I used that 3-part finish on it, and it now weighs approximately 3 times as much as it did when I took it off the lathe. It just soaks the finish up. Still smells faintly of paint thinner.
Oh.
These are some more of those Warpies. And this is walnut. It's the first time I've turned, I mean, I've got 6 of them, I think. And all of these have are hollow forms. The one on the right, the one on the far left, I chopped the top off of, not intentionally. Once you turn the inside, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly how big that void is. And so when you start cutting the fins, I just went a little too far on the left one. The one on the right worked. I was a little more conservative, and it's still in the process of drying. It'll work some more. The one in the middle, I think the key is I started out wanting to do, I wanted it to be hollow. And so that the ball in the middle is another one of those faux hollow forms. I turned the ends out and then put a box joint on and glued them back together. And the two cones are also hollow, so the whole thing doesn't weigh quite as much as it might. And it's kind of strange. Not always, the fins don't always work the way I think they're going to. The sapwood works a whole lot more than the heartwood. And people tell me it looks like those things on the bridges downtown. And I agree with them, though I didn't necessarily intend that when I started making it.
You try cutting those around the pith, Anthony?
Did I do what now? Oh, no. One of the things I learned early on was the pith in most of the trees I've used thus far destroy the piece. And so these are, you have to cut them from something bigger so that you can avoid the pith completely. I think this piece was, it was probably 10 to 12 inches in diameter, and I cut it in half, cut the pith out, and then made, I think, I'm still using the same piece of wood, so I think I've made, I don't know, 6 or 8 of these out of just the one piece. So it's real economical use of wood. Yeah.
Did you want to say something more?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, this is Daniel Dubois.
So this is a piece I made out of a quarter of a walnut log. So it didn't have the pith in it either. But I really like the contrast between the sapwood and the heartwood. So I turned a water drop shaped vase and then used a rotary tool to carve the splash effect at the top. So just a couple of different views with the different varying cuts and things that I made for the splash effect. And then this is a bowl I just recently did out of the largest piece of honeysuckle stump I've ever seen. I cut it in half, and then I still had this bowl, which is 6 inches deep and 10 inches across. And so I cast it with Total Boat resin with ebony and copper penny mica powders, and they swirl together pretty good to give it that really nice contrast with the graining in the honeysuckle stump, which has very much a burl-like effect in the way that the graining went through it. And then that's just another shot of showing the swirling in the resin, and then some more of the graining.
This is Dave Stalling.
That's cool.
That is a vertical view, or shall we say a downward looking view of a piece of redbud that had 2 limbs grown together almost. And in the next, there should be 1 or 2 more. There you can kind of see what it is. And it's turned with a chair-like shape, and it's about 6 inches high, or 7 inches high, and 4 or 5 inches in diameter. And it was quite an interesting way to turn the center out with that little chair thing flying around. So it should be another picture, maybe. There you go. Now you can see what it was. So interesting turn for me, and it's just finished with walnut oil. And there's a bowl from the same redbud tree. A friend of ours had a driveway lined with redbuds, and one of them rotted off at the base, and so he brought over the rest of it that wasn't shot. And I've got about 8 or 10 inch pieces of the trunk. A couple more, just showing different one. Interestingly, keeping it together was quite a challenge. Is the last one? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that's all.
What was hard to keep it together?
Well,
just cracking or splitting?
It was very crack prone, and it has some CA assisted bonding in it.
Okay.
but turn it thin enough, that gets it gets a little easier to keep it together. It didn't actually separate anywhere, but it just had, those lines are not natural. I mean, they are sort of natural lines with the grain that was there. No alteration of there, nor was there any color added to it.
Anthony Harris once told me, you live by red bud, you die by red bud.
It's tricky. I will say that.
Okay, this is Chris Coyne.
Okay, so this is one of those. Can you go to one of the other slides? Yeah, this is just one of those crotch, turn it thin with a bowl in it. Only the piece of crotch that I had, this was the back half, and it was only about 2.5 inches thick at the thickest point. And so in order to get a full half sphere off of it, I had to have a pretty small bowl in the center of it. And when I was done, I was dissatisfied with the look overall. Of course, I was trying to capture that feather grain going through there. But what I was displeased with was the proportion of the bowl shape to the rest of the log. And so by adding the rays of the sun around it and wood burning those into it, I increased the size of that center image. And it was a little bit more pleasing to the eye. So it was just a fun little project that I had rolling around in the back of my car or in the back seat for a long time, and finally got in and finished it off. And was a lot of sanding, but I liked what I ended up with. That's it.
Cool.
And this is Mark Inman.
Yeah, sorry, Steve, I mislabeled it, but it was supposed to go into the challenge piece. But either way, it's stabilized maple burl pins.
And
I never even thought about the pin being a metal and wood thing. Come on.
I thought I was not going to be the only one, but I was the
Way
only
to
one.
go, Mark.
Oh, this is my tool adapter again. Click through the next. I was going to just show a little bit about how okay, there's I have a ball valve. I connect the hose to my air compressor, and I can turn the ball valve on, and it blows through the hose into the end of the adapter, and then, or the holder, and then it goes down through the flute or the channel in the gun drill. Click to the next one. Let's see. Yeah, that's where, okay. This is a setup I have. That's a piece of flute wood I've chucked up, and then I have my spindle steady on there, and I'm drilling. You have to put a pilot hole in there. And my gun drill is 13/16 in diameter. And so I have a, this is a 3-prong Forstner bit, 13/16. And you have to go at least 3 to 4 diameters deep to get the tip of the gun drill in there so it goes straight. So that's what I'm doing here. And then the next one, Sue. Oh, that's where I'm drilling the pilot hole. The next one. Oh, that's where I've got the gun drill in the pilot hole there, and I've got it hooked up to my air compressor. And all you do is you press on the tailstock, and it just drive. The piece of flute wood is rotating by the lathe, and you just press on your tailstock, and it goes all the way through in one pass, and it polishes it and everything. I mean, it's beautiful, but you just try to keep a steady, even pressure all the way through. It's not one of those where you drill, halfway through on one end and then turn it around and do the other end, because that messes it up. But it's amazing how accurate those things are when you have everything lined up, and then you just push it through or push it in there.
Is this, you are making flutes?
Well, my daughter wants one, and I thought, well, I have all this flute wood, so I thought, well, I probably ought to try to make a flute. And so that's what I'm going to do. I've looked online. There's a whole bunch of people that make flutes, and it seems like the Native American flutes, have that the sound chamber thing is a lot easier with the Native American flute because it's two-piece and you can adjust it as opposed to cutting it in. And probably I would have difficulty doing that and probably have a lot of waste. But anyway, it's just something, like I say, after seeing Trent Bosch play around with the gun drill and everything, it kind of got me intrigued with the process. And so this gave me a good excuse to pursue it. And it's fun. It works out well. You'd never guess that, man, it says 100 pounds of air pressure is what you're supposed to use. And, my compressor goes up pretty good. It blows stuff everywhere. I've got to try to figure out to put a plastic bowl or something around there. So all the shavings that come out of the flute, just spray all over. To the right side, on the whole right side of my shop, it's sprayed with shavings. So got to try to.
Mike, what's the light that you're using there?
What's that?
What is the light? Is it an LED light?
Yeah, I've got, that's one of those Woodturner Wonders I got from Ken Rizza. I've got two of them. There's one above, and then there's that one that I have for like the tail stock. Those are really, they're really bright.
Virgil Boyd was the first person I ever saw use one of those. He was making those goblets with that he cut the spirals in, and he first drilled a hole down the center of them and would put a contrasting wood. So you ended up mostly with a holly inside, 1/8 of an inch in diameter, and then this a dark wood spiral that runs around it. And I took a pipe that I was making out of boxwood to his house once, and it had an 8-inch stem on it. And he used his gun drill, and it was 1/8 inch. He stuck his air source in the end of the handle, and he pushed it in by hand. And it's just like Mike says, it blows stuff everywhere. But what was interesting is he drilled that 1/8 inch hole as though he was trying to shovel manure. I mean, he just centered it up and just pushed it. And it took him, I don't know, half a second or a second and maybe a whole second, and he just drilled the hole. It was straight as can be.
It is amazing how the geometry, the way they grind the tip and everything to where it's self-centering. I still can't figure out how it does it, but it works. So it's fun.
Very cool. And thanks for sharing. I had never heard of it. So it's all new info to me.
Yeah.
And this is Rick Bywater.
Well, Sue, I was hoping you'd show the bottom part. I sent, it was termite eaten.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have that picture?
Is that it?
No.
I sent 3 pictures, and those are the 3 I have.
Okay.
Looks like termites have been at work here.
All right. Well, anyway, this is a piece, the same wood that I donated to the club back in August.
Oh,
and then I had this piece, and I turned it probably 4 years ago, and the termites had totally eaten the bottom, and I couldn't chuck it up. So finally it dawned on me, why don't I just try to do a selective pour? And so that's what I did, and then was able to finish turning the entire piece, and it turned out wonderful. I mean, I could have turned it thinner, but when you look at the top part of the natural edge and the bark that's hanging on the top part, Sue, it's just hanging. It's amazing to me. So there's moss growing on there and all kinds of stuff. So it's a piece of Oriental Japanese cherry burl. And then those are just two resin spheres that I basically ended up buying a sphere caliper, and it's really been fun to turn spheres perfectly every time.
Very nice, Rick.
The one
Is
is
it a problem when you go from the resin to the burl, I mean, or the wood? How does that cut?
how does what
Oh, is it consistent, or is there, you have to be really careful around the resin before you get to the wood, or vice versa?
well, what I had to do on that piece, Mike, was I'm going to call them selective pours. So up until now, I've always done a total immersion of wood into resin. Okay. Well, I didn't want resin in my bark. That would have looked terrible. So by turning it upside down and just kind of building a dam, I was able to first pour around where the chuck was going to hold the piece. And once that was done, I was able to then turn that away. And then on the far right there, you can see the blue where the cracking occurred in the wood. And so I did the same thing, a selective pour, and filled that up. And that goes all the way through the wood. So, all the way through. And it just, it's hard to explain this. It's so much easier just to show it to you. And that's the thing I don't like about pictures and Zoom, is not being able to hold the piece and really take a look at what it's all about. So I don't know if I can answer your question on that, but it turns, once see, the thing is with resin, it takes me 20 hours. Once I have 20 minutes to put it in the pressure pot, and I leave it in there for 20 hours, and then I take it out, and I still have to let it kind of harden a bit before I put it on the lathe, turn away the excess, and then do another pour. So this piece ended up having, I think, 4 separate pours in order to then finish it to its final finish.
Wow.
And it's beautiful.
So resin will fill small cracks like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've really perfected how to make a pour in a selective area. And I've got some really cool things that are kind of coming down the pipeline.
Okay, well, we need to talk later.
But on the left side there, you can see one of them is the front one is a pine cone, and if you can't really zoom in on that, but and then the other one is half burl and then just half resin. And Effie, you saw those. They were they're pretty cool when you hold them up.
Sue, can you on your computer go up and then zoom in on that or enlarge it right above the photo?
I'm afraid Zoom has.
The
Yes,
magnifying
glass on the left.
Right next
Left.
there.
Left.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about this? Does this help at all?
This is a beautiful Rick.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's hard to.
Oh, look at the bottom of that. The right side of that front sphere. Wow.
Yeah, that one's this one right here.
Oh yeah, cool.
Rick, what kind of resin do you use? Do you use Alumilite or Total Boat or?
I use smooth. It's called Smooth On.
Okay.
And this particular series is 200. Now, what I have been doing, and I was going to have it for the next show and tell, although I could give you a sneak peek. I've learned how to chase threads now with epoxy, and it turns out wonderful. I mean, hang on, let me get it for you.
All right. Well, Rick's
Only
getting
Anthony
that.
would do that. chase threads in epoxy.
Oh yeah, here I am. Okay. All right. So now here's this. This is a box. And can you see the?
Is that a pine cone
Let
too?
me stop the
Hang
share
on.
and see if we can get him full screen.
I don't know how to do a full screen. Do I have to do anything?
You're full screen now for us
Oh, I am? Okay.
as your
So,
speaker.
okay. So now look, take a look at this now.
Wow. Ooh, man,
Isn't that cool?
that really is cool.
And then here's the bottom. I did some nice beads. But anyway, yeah, it chases really pretty cool.
Wow. Man.
Now I've discovered this other resin that I'm using, and Don Frank turned me on to this. So I've got this new resin that I've been testing that sets up in 2.5 minutes and is ready to chase threads in 15 minutes. And so I've been using that.
Is it real brittle?
And it's black. So it's called liquid plastic. And the reason why I went to it is because I wanted it to look like African blackwood. The problem with African blackwood is if this happens to be probably 4 inches wide, it's hard to find a piece of African blackwood that big. I mean, you'd have to segment it in order to try and make the thread. So basically liquid plastic seems to work pretty well. So that's what I've been working on.
That's amazing.
But anyway, yeah, this
Thank you for sharing that.
this particular has four different colors.
Wow. Where do you find your pine cones?
From trees.
Where?
They're everywhere, Mike. Seriously, they're everywhere. Whether we're going on a vacation or just out and about. I mean, I've used little pine cones. I've used big pine cones. Obviously, I've used the biggest pine cone there is called a Widowmaker, which is a Coulter pine cone. And those typically weigh between 5 and 7 pounds. Now, the only place you're going to be able to find those today is probably on eBay. But anyway, it's fun.
Mike, they have some pretty big, not that big. They have some pretty decent sized ones out there at that Therapeutic Riding Center. And I'm heading out there tomorrow afternoon. If anybody wants any, I can pick up a bag of them. They're decent size for around here.
Yeah, and
I would appreciate that, Mark. I'd like to play with some.
And the thing is I use a urethane resin, so they have to be completely dry. So you'd want to make sure you put that in the oven and dry it up.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yep.
Another thing that can help with some of those is a stabilization setup. If you can do any stabilizing, you can use, you can do a lot more with some of that thing. Some of those like magnolia pods or pine cones, you can just make them a little bit more firm, especially if they're pretty brittle. You can stabilize them first.
Well, they get totally poured in the resin, which is the stabilizer.
Right. There's a stabilizing resin, and sometimes if there's too much of a moisture content, you can get them super dry, but if it's really brittle, a lot of the resin will get absorbed into it, which helps. But a stabilizing resin can also help with that. So you can stabilize it like with cactus juice in a vacuum chamber. Oh, yeah. And you can stabilize wood, but you can do that. There's a lot of ways you can do it.
Yeah, just make sure they're dry is all you need to do. It's not, believe me, you don't need to worry about stabilizing them.
Good.
All right.
Well, thanks.
Thanks for sharing, Rick.
Yep.
We appreciate it. We are running kind of late tonight, so I guess other than, does anybody have anything that they needed to say or anything that I forgot to announce tonight that they'd want to put in here at the end of the meeting? Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I
thank you.
really appreciate our three presenters tonight for introducing us to the laser engraver and some of the capabilities and limitations and safety things to consider when you're using them. Thanks for everybody that's shared an item during show and tell, and thanks for everybody that participated in this month's challenge. Look forward to seeing you guys all next month. Look for an email from me with a questionnaire regarding return to in-person meetings, and be as honest as you can when you send it back to me. I guess that's it. Unless somebody else has something else, I will see you all next month or hopefully before. Thank you all for attending tonight. I appreciate, we had a good attendance tonight.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye,
Good
guys.
meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
So long. Good night.
Thanks,
everybody.
Daniel.
Here.
Thanks, Kevin.
You
Good
bet.
job, everybody, on the presentations. They were really good.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah. I've learned a lot.
I like Snippet. I used that while I was waiting in the background. It worked great. I had it, didn't know it. Hey, Effie, thanks for recording. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Good night then. See you, Effie.
Bye.